In this video, we're going to go over the design process and all the steps that basically go into what the design process is, how it works, and putting any building together. This is just to give you a simple overview of the design process and effectively the 7 steps that we take throughout the design process and what architects and engineers go through in that process. So, number one is program. So, this is primarily architecture, and the architect's working with the owner to determine what the program of the building is. How many rooms, the layout, how many stories, how many square feet, how many people are going to be in here, and then that'll determine parking and kind of site layout, all that kind of good stuff. So that is program, basically defining the scope of the building first and foremost. Their needs, what's required, and then putting it together from there. Then we have what's known as schematic design or SD. Schematic design is really that initial stage of the building. It's still a bleed over from programmatic stages and planning to the starting to put in ceilings, walls, floors, doors, right? Levels of the building, everything's designed, right? Program is just getting an idea of it. And then schematic is actually starting to put a model together of the building, what it's going to look like, and going through that kind of phase of it. In SD for engineering, this means that we're going to start putting together really the main spaces of the building. So, electrical rooms, mechanical rooms, utilities, those are the big things that we're trying to figure out in this phase of design to understand if we're going to need bigger mechanical rooms, bigger electrical rooms. Some initial sizing is going on at this point of gear and placement of equipment. So, typically, what we'll do is basically lay out the main electrical rooms of the building, the main mechanical rooms of the building, plumbing, fire riser feeds, things like that, utility kind of coordination initially is going to get laid out. And then in traditional design bid build, it'll be like a narrative is what we'll provide of the types of lighting, lighting controls, right? 0 to 10 volt dimmers, occupancy sensors, time of day, unless there's going to be any like high end lighting control system, right? We're going to have panels and everything's going to be single building control, right? Stuff like that is what we're going to do a design narrative on. Our typical panels, right? If we're doing copper or aluminum busing, main gear setup, if we're going to have generators or everything's going to be battery packs, things like that, right? Your main design criteria are what's going to be laid out, the type of fire alarm system, low voltage criteria, things like that is what we're basically doing a narrative on for schematic design. That typically gets priced out by the general contractor and potentially goes to electrical contractors and all the other specialty contractors to determine a rough ballpark pricing for the building at this very preliminary stage. Then we move on to what is known as design documents. This is really where the bulk of the drafting gets done for the project. So we're laying out all of the lighting. So we're actually doing calculations and laying out lighting controls. We're laying out normal convenience receptacles, convenience outlets throughout the building. We're doing a lot of powering of equipment, the initial powering of mechanical equipment. Mechanicals getting laid out, right? They're putting their ductwork in, their initial load calcs, sizing, that kind of stuff is getting put in the building. We're figuring out the coordination in the above ceiling cavities, in the plenum space, and who's going where, right? Plumbing, electrical, and ductwork. Figuring out where everybody's sitting within that plenum space, and that's really the big effort in design documents. This is where like the bulk of the drafting work gets done. This is where the bulk of the layout is, and then at the end of design documents, we want to have a pretty good set of drawings to price. And typically, it's at this point, go, no go. We start to do maybe some value engineering, or they can't maybe afford a wing or section of the building, or taking down stories, whatever that amounts to. We're really trying to dial that in here in design documents as we've put a lot of that system together. We're starting to do some coordination throughout the building, but really the bulk of the work is getting done here. Then we move on to what's known as construction documents or CDs. And in CDs, we're basically doing everything to finalize coordination. Electrically, this means circuiting, finalizing the fixture schedule. This is getting all the decorative and fixtures done, all the architectural stuff is done. Mechanical will finalize their loads and everything on their side. Plumbing will finalize their stuff. So we'll coordinate with them and power those pieces up. We'll coordinate with architecture for like TV locations, conference room stuff, any of the audio visual that's going into the project. All that final coordination piece circuiting, if they've got powered blinds or windows, anything like that is getting done in this phase of design, right? Putting together construction documents. This is all the notations. This is final circuiting, final sizing, everything to go basically to bid. And you can get but somewhere between design documents and construction documents would be where you could go to permit if you needed to for electrical design. But realistically, we want to finish up our final sizing and those calculations before we go to permit, just so we don't have to issue addendums or anything like that. The big things in permitting obviously are lighting, power, fire alarm, getting those done and shown on the drawings, somewhat on the low voltage side, but for sure lighting, power, if they need any photometric calculations, those would be provided at that time too for the HJ for emergency and egress lighting, and then as well as fire alarm. Those are typically the big things need to be shown, and then panel sizing, things like that. In healthcare settings, there's a lot more that go into that in permit that those HJs and healthcare folks look at. So then the next phase, once we finish up construction documents, we're into bidding, right? This is typically where a lot of contractors, a lot of you guys would come in, right? You take a look at the drawings. Now you're starting to bid it. We'd have RFIs and issue addendums during bid phase. Again, depending on the project, will determine how long bid phase is. Could be a couple months, could be a couple weeks. Just depends on the size of the project and scope and what we're dealing with. So bidding is that next phase, getting through that, issuing any addendums, clarifying anything that we need to on the drawings. And then from there, once bids are in, contractors are selected, then we'll go into the construction phase and CA, construction administration, at least from the engineering and architecture standpoint. We're administering a lot of just administration, right? We're doing submittals and on-site reviews, walkthroughs, punch lists, right? Above ceiling walkthrough, final punch, close, not close out. We'll get to that next. But really all the construction administration stuff, submittals, RFIs, maybe some change orders. Hopefully not. We want to minimize those on the project, at least from the design perspective. Want to minimize those on the project, and really probably for you guys too. Nobody really likes dealing with change orders. It is part of the project. So do that in the construction phase. And then really the final piece is closeout, getting all the operations manuals, the O&Ms over to the owner, any red lines and markups that we on the design side would need to make to the drawings to submit to the owner so that they have basically a full coordinated final as-built set of drawings. That would be on us to provide with your help from what was done during the construction of the project, and really just handing over the keys to the owner at that point. Make sure we've onboarded and trained in everything that we need to, right? For any maintenance items, walk through the maintenance folks, make sure that they know what they're looking at and doing, and really go from there. It's all turnover and stuff you guys are very familiar with. So those are the really the seven, make sure I'm counting right, but the seven phases of construction in from the design perspective, right? You guys will have your own phases that you're going to walk through, but really from the design perspective, there's three big phases, especially on the engineering side: schematic design documents and construction documents. Those are the three big phases with the bulk of the work getting done in design documents, right? That's when the floor plan's been set by the architects and schematic and figured out with the owner and what's going into this building, the layout, the size, shape, scope, whatever we're doing, right? Office, number of offices or number of classrooms, size of classrooms, type of classrooms, industrial facility, right? How big we need in the manufacturing space, where the electrical penthouses are going, where the air handler penthouses are going, busways, restrooms, if we're doing any catwalks or anything like that, all that's somewhat getting figured out in schematic, really in catwalks and a lot of those more intricate details. We're doing that in the design document phase, but from a program standpoint, it's like layout of the industrial space, what's production, walkways, and restrooms. Those are and egress. Those are the big things done. And then obviously, as we get further, it gets more and more detailed. So, simple outline of what the construction phases are. And we'll dive into a little more in a future video on what that entails. But this will give you a real kind of big overview picture of the seven phases of construction. So, thanks for watching this video, and stay tuned for more as we walk through more of the design process. So, stay tuned, and thank you for watching.